Good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Christy Siefkin, and as a former meteorologist, I am thrilled to be moderating the panel today with David, who not only has extensive experience in space exploration, but he is a physicist, he is an executive, and he is an entrepreneur. And David's background ranges from working with Department of Defense to NASA, and now he works obviously here at ASU with the MILO Institute. You started your career as a physicist, went the entrepreneurial route, became an executive. Now that you're at MILO, explain to us what MILO Institute does in simple terms.
So the MILO Institute is really all about creating access to space. It's really creating the pathway for that thing that I just mentioned. Now that we are at this point in time where space is accessible, how do we make that real to the non-traditional participant, to universities, to companies, to startups who may not have a background in space, they may not have a background in STEM. How do we make it such that they are able to go? So we have a series of programs from capacity building for emerging countries to lunar missions.
Who here remembers learning about the space race in school? Back when there were textbooks. I learned recently that students don't have textbooks anymore, which made me feel very old. But we think of the race to the moon or interplanetary exploration as being a competition, something that countries are trying to pit against each other to get there first, to discover things first. The model you've adopted is the opposite. It is crowdsourcing resources and collaborating internationally. Why this shift and why is that important?
Yeah, so we're motivated by our charter, and I clicked the wrong button here, but our charter at ASU is truly motivation for many people, including myself. There's two things that are really important about the charter that Dr. Crow has put forward. One, we measure our success by who we include, not by who we exclude. And number two, we take fundamental responsibility for the communities we serve. So if I'm going to Ecuador or Morocco and I'm engaging with programming, I have a responsibility for that region's success. I now have the ability with Lockheed Martin to offer the trip to the moon and the entire infrastructure is provided as a service. The launch, the landing, the mobility, the energy, the ability to survive the very cold temperatures of the lunar night. And so the individual, perhaps a university program, perhaps a startup, can focus on putting their instrument, their capability, their innovation on the surface of the moon. They don't have to worry about the rest of the infrastructure. This is a game changer. We're working in Morocco, in the United Arab Emirates, in Ecuador, and there's a tremendous desire globally to participate in space. It's an exciting time.
As we look at these collaborations and we look at some of your points of pride, they are connected to collecting this data. So let's transition a little bit to the satellites. You have a collaboration with Planet Labs, and if you're not familiar with Planet Labs, they have over 200 satellites that are orbiting the globe every day and getting a full picture every 90 minutes of Earth. I believe 11 terabytes of data is downloaded every single day of these pictures, and it's being used to become better stewards of our planet. Can you talk to us about the work that you're doing at ASU that is helping us become better stewards?
Indeed, this is something that we've recognized, and other leaders here at ASU have recognized. This is an important time in history. We know that things are changing. We look at the rainfall in California just the last 6 to 7 months. We look at the storms and the increasing veracity of the storms. We look at the droughts, and we know things are happening. We know things are changing. And we want to be able to support those organizations, those individuals who desire to be stewards of what they have. There are many markets that are going to be impacted and are being impacted by space. In agriculture, we can think about crop health. We can think about hydration. We can actually look and see when disease enters a crop, and that allows us to be monitors and managers at a level that we've never had before. This supports things like hunger in the United Nations SDGs. We can actually encourage appropriate hydration, fertilization, management of crops so that we have more food for more people and we affect a greater portion of the population from space.
You brought up an outstanding point here, that this is not just about supporting the planet from an environmental perspective, but it is about the humanitarian crises that are emerging because of food scarcity, because of issues with wildfires, lack of water. What do you see as the long-term impact from a social responsibility standpoint?
So there's so many elements that are intertwined. If we think about food scarcity and water scarcity or security, this will create conflict. Conflict creates migrations of populations, and we're already seeing this now, where there are large numbers of people who are displaced. And I feel like we have a responsibility, we have a sense of a burden to do whatever we can to assist these vulnerable populations. We have this moment in time where people that have access to data from space are going to have advantages. How do we share those advantages with more people?
This has to become rather emotional at a point for you. When we spoke prior to today, I could tell you're so passionate about this, about the impact you're having on humanity. And you brought up earlier ASU's mission to be inclusive. This isn't just about our community in Arizona, it's about the globe. When you work with these countries that potentially did not have the resources, the finances to do this on their own, what's the feedback you're getting from them? What sort of statements of gratitude are you hearing?
Oh, it's phenomenal. And frankly, this is sort of my own story. I'm first to graduate in my family from a university. I had no idea that I could do applied physics, but I had a few people that opened doors for me. And so now this creates a sense of connection to others around the world who may have something inside, but they don't see themselves in this place of being able to participate in space, for example.
David and I were speaking before today about an article that came out in BuzzFeed. This was in March of 2019. Does anybody remember what one of the BuzzFeed journalists saw in China? Does this ring a bell for anybody? So there was a journalist, and do you remember? Okay, go ahead and tell us. That may be another one. We're going to bring you up to talk about that next. So based on this data that was collected by satellites, one of these journalists found internment camps in China. In looking at these satellites going around the globe, they ended up exposing these horrific conditions. So social justice obviously can be achieved through this, but from an environmental standpoint, and you had some great graphics in the first first deck you sent me. Can you show us some of those pictures of comparing fields and crops, comparing water? Because it's these types of images as these satellites are going around every day that inform huge changes.
Yeah, that's right. And it's really fascinating because we know that the ecosystem is intertwined, and we know things like deforestation are bad. But what we're starting to realize is how bad this really is, because there's actually a correlation between deforestation and increase in the population of mosquitoes that bear diseases. So deforestation produces an increase in malaria. It also changes...
Say that one more time, David, because it's really important.
So there's a correlation, and this is found in Latin America, in Paraguay actually, where deforestation creates localized temperature changes that are favorable for mosquitoes. Mosquitoes carry diseases like malaria.
Right.
So deforestation is actually correlated now to an increase in malaria. So this brings it home. It's not just an idealistic kind of thing. This is really for our physical well-being.
There's a graphic in your deck. I'm going to cue you now to find it for us, David, of outer space, the big blue marble as we look back at Earth. And you shared such an amazing sentiment with me when we spoke, that you consistently hear the same thing from astronauts as they look back at Earth. What is it?
Astronauts that go into space, to the space station, to the moon, there is overwhelmingly one thing that they come back and they say, and that is, when I got to space and I looked back at Earth, I saw no boundaries. There were no borders. And that is compelling. That is compelling.
And it speaks to your mission in general, which is that we are supporting this entire global community, not just Arizona here at ASU.
That's correct, that's right. And especially in Arizona, we have an opportunity with ASU, with the University of Arizona, with NAU, all are world leaders in space.
I'm amazed you said NAU and ASU in the same breath.
I actually have good friends at ASU. I love going to fly. So,
I love that. It's all about inclusivity, no hatred here. David, it has been a delight to speak with you. This is going to be it for our questions on stage, but we have time to take questions from the audience. This is your chance to ask David any pressing question you have about space exploration, about traveling to the moon, about planetary stewardship, about sustainability, once he gets a chance for a sip of water. So what questions do we have for David?